Welcome back to the Alt. Thank you for joining me again today. I'm your host, Shapirian, and guys, Week 3 Sunday has been written in the record books. We've got a ton to talk about, lots of questions answered, more being asked now after the result of these Week 3 games. We got 5 takes in 5 minutes coming up later. Cowboys-Ravens, a bit of a Monday night preview, a ton to talk about in this Monday after Week 3 because it's getting to the point of the season where things are starting to develop and we're getting a better understanding of what this year is going to look like. Before we get into that, if you could please do me a favor and check and see if you're subscribed to the channel, and if you're not, please consider doing so. It just takes a second. It helps me out massively. You can also follow me on most social media at the Alt NFL. I would love to hear from you. You can also comment down below if I missed something or if there's something you'd like for me to talk about. But without further ado, let's talk about the game that I dubbed as the most important game of the year so far. And it kind of stunk, and then it kind of lived up to it at the end, but left us all hanging because we didn't get to see the ball in the hands of Dallas with the chance to come back and win it. Of course, talking about Ravens, Cowboys. They win by 3, ultimately speaking. They put the hands on the ball of Lamar, as they always do in the situation, to go win it for him. But I don't know that I have a ton of answers about either team right now. I wrote it down here that I don't know that I'm going to be able to trust either one of these teams for the foreseeable future. In fact, for Baltimore, I almost want to see a bit of a win streak come as a result of this, with the exception of Week 5, that is. But without that, I don't know that I'm going to trust them any more than I would have if they would have lost this game. Because they almost lost this game with a huge 28-6 fourth quarter lead. As a matter of fact, if they would have lost this game, there was that fan with the 28-3 Falcons Patriots sign on his t-shirt, and I have to imagine that guy would have been everywhere, right? Like, it would have been like, oh, this guy showed up, and then the Ravens really decided to pull one of those today. Something about the Ravens late in games makes them play weird. I've talked about it a little bit on the show, but I've talked about how teams try to play to not lose instead of trying to play to win. That's the perfect way to describe the Ravens when they have leads late in games. And look, again, it almost cost them one. I believe it was Mike Greenberg, of course, ESPN. If you're listening to this show, you know who Mike Greenberg is. I think it was him that was like, look, I get they've got to think for blowing fourth quarter leads, but if they lose this game, that's an entirely different conversation. And I agree. Then you have to have very uncomfortable conversations about, like, where's the season going to go? Can we trust Harbaugh? Things of that nature. You win the game, and it seems for me, if I'm the Ravens, okay, you found your formula, which is you have to let Derrick Henry get some momentum if you're going to let him put games away for you in the second half. I've expressed concerns, and the Ravens have backed up what I've thought about it before by saying they're not going to use him this way. When I've said, I don't know that Henry's going to be a high-volume guy for the Ravens, and I don't know that I like him as a high-volume guy for the Ravens. That said, he can't go into the second half with like 8 carries for 19 yards, and it's like, that's not going to work. And we saw that in this game, like, he was able to get going early, and he essentially put the game away for them in the second half on that first drive coming out of the gates, drove them right down, scored. He's got that nasty stiff arm still in his arsenal. It's good to see it for him. And he looks like a legitimate weapon for this offense. One of the few halfbacks in the NFL that I would still consider to be a genuine weapon, even if he's a little more specific than the other guys. He's better in second halves of games than he is in first halves, but that doesn't mean you can't use him at all in the first half. They kind of tried that against KC. Didn't use him a ton in the second half against Vegas. We see where that got them. In this one, they really leaned on him, and he delivered. I think that is their formula. Because if you've got that 1-2 punch in the backfield and you don't know who's going to be taking the ball, but either way, it's a legitimately threatening ball carrier, it's a good recipe for them. Dallas so narrowly avoided getting blown out in this one. I was so ready to call this one early, and I honestly thought if they got the ball back, they would have won the game. And who's to say they might have won the game? Just like in Week 1 against the Chiefs, I think if that toe of Isaiah Likely is in bounds, I think they go for 2 and win the game. Just because momentum works that way, and they had all of it at that point in time. But for Dallas, I said, as long as you don't get blown out in this one, you can lose this one, and I'm not super concerned. I don't know that that's true, because you did basically get blown out, even though it was a 3-point loss at the end of the day. You've got ran all over, and your defense just doesn't look threatening at all. You go into Thursday Night Football this week, short week, against the Giants, who have found the recipe they're going to lean on this season, which is Jones to Neighbors, Jones to Neighbors, Jones to Neighbors, and Singletary doing what he can for them as a result. That's their entire offense. I would have gone into this game and said, guys, 90% chance Dallas wins this one. I have almost no fear of it. And I like to throw those high numbers out probably more than I should for the NFL. Like I've thrown out 2% chance a couple times, and that's just not realistic. But it would have been one of those games. Now, if I'm a Dallas fan, and I'm a big believer in Dallas this season, I'm incredibly concerned about them. I think the Ravens have to learn to keep their foot on the pedal. The Cowboys have to learn to keep people's foots off their throats. You can't get into these shootouts every single week and expect to win a ton of football games. So with this one, I don't know that I have any true takeaways from either team. Maybe both of these teams are just going to be weird all season and be in weird football games all season long and put us in weird situations as people trying to cover it and be like, I don't know what to think about these guys. They don't know what to think about them. They're so inconsistent week to week. That's how it's looked so far with them. The Dallas that we saw against Cleveland has not shown its face since then. And, with that said, that's their only win. New York beat Cleveland today too. It's not like you can really hang your hat on that going into week 4, Thursday Night Football, when those games are weird anyways. Baltimore, game 1 of 3 of your big stretch done. You got the victory that you needed. You had to have this one. Now, going back to the bank, and Buffalo is coming to town this week. That's another must win, because 1-3 is not that much better, even if it is marginally better for your chances to win the division than, a 0-4 would be. Speaking of the division, let's move on. Let's talk Steelers-Chargers, and to be completely honest with you, when I say let's talk Steelers-Chargers, I mean let's talk Steelers. Another ugly win. And you're like, what do you mean? They won by 2 scores. It was an ugly win. If not for a weird, explosive chunk play that the Steelers have not had literally all season with the Calvin Austin breakaway touchdown from midfield. That game is 13-10 going down the stretch, and you're depending on an injured Justin Herbert to try to win it for you. It was weird. Fields is continuing to be the perfect QB for the current Mike Tomlin, Arthur Smith offense. And these 3 wins for them right now are major. Because every single game from now until November 17th, that's the first time they played the Ravens, that's the beginning of their 8-game gauntlet in the year, that is all AFC North plus Chiefs plus Eagles, is incredibly winnable. There's one game in this stretch, it's Sunday night at home with Dallas coming to town. And with the exception of that one, I think the Steelers are going to be favored from now through November 17th in every game. Potentially even with that one, given that it's a home game and Dallas has looked very questionable all year. You throw a good defense like Pittsburgh's against a team like Dallas, and we're getting ahead of ourselves because that's down the line. But you have to wonder, what's Dallas going to do, dude? Hard to tell. I still believe in Dallas. I still don't know if I believe in Pittsburgh yet. We'll talk a little more about it here. The one thing that needs discussed is the quarterback situation. As time goes on and Russell Wilson is only going to get more and more and more healthy, and to be honest with you, I'm surprised he's not 100% cleared yet, because we saw Joe Burrow last season play on this injury and he looked really bad and was basically the poster child for this is why you don't play on this calf injury. And they made everyone question, well, how bad is Jake Browning then if they're throwing Burrow out there looking like this? And like I said, NBC is running a whole bit on look, he literally can't plant on this calf at all and it's making his throws come out wildly inaccurate. So that's kind of what Russell Wilson has been dealing with. That said, week 4, when this was a preseason injury, got to be getting there, right? They had that press conference early in the week where they were like, there's a plan and we're sticking to the plan. And the major media outlets looked at that and said, okay, that to me implies the plan is, let's get you healthy, take your time, when you're healthy, you're going in. And they're looking into, I want to say it was Colin Cowherd I was listening to talk about this. He's like, look, he's out there smiling, talking about there's a plan, and you were sticking to the plan. He's like, does that look like a guy who's been told, hey, if this keeps going, you're going to be the number 2? No. That's before they won their first real test of the year against the Chargers, who looked really good in weeks 1 and 2, didn't look capable offensively at all this week. There is, unfortunately, again, for Pittsburgh fans, in my opinion, an asterisk next to your 3-0. Because You beat the Falcons, who helped you out a ton. I think it was a 6-point victory, right? If I'm not mistaken. Maybe it was an 8-point victory. Was it 18-10? I can't remember. I think that was the 6 field goal game. It was a 1-score game. Kirk looked like a statue. First game for him in a new system. And the Falcons offense kept you in that game all day. You got the Bo Nix game. Bo Nix threw a couple of really bad picks. They were right there all game. Couldn't get the job done. And now, the Chargers, great. Justin Herbert was hurt, and he looked hurt all game. And I'm not downing the Steelers. I have already said they're real playoff contenders. I said that before the season. I'm like, you know what? They are legitimate, bona fide playoff contenders as currently constructed. And I have nothing but respect for Mike Tomlin. But I want to see them do it against, and look a little better while doing it. If you're going to do it against the crappy teams, can you look a little better? Because until you do it against a good team, I'm still going to question it. That said, 2-game lead guaranteed going into week 4, even with a division rival yet to play in Cincinnati, because you've got Cleveland at 1-2, Baltimore at 1-2. You're 3-0. 2-game lead going into week 4. It's not insignificant. I'm going to keep it calm on Pittsburgh because of who they've beaten so far. But 2 games up in the AFC North is massive for them. Chargers, not super concerned because when Herbert is hurt, the offense is going to look weird. You couldn't get it going on offense. They teed off on your run game all game. And as we get more of a sample size from J.K. Dobbins, I'm not sure that he's going to be the world-beating halfback that he was in weeks 1 and 2 on the limited carries that he got in those weeks. So, Steelers, Chargers. Congrats, Pittsburgh. LA, you'll be fine. Just do it against the Chiefs, and we'll get to talking about you more in a positive light. Now, the one other thing before I get to 5 takes in 5 minutes, the first time I'm doing that, I want to just throw some stuff out there because there's so much this week to talk about. Minnesota. I tweeted, I believe it was 14-0. I tweeted from the alt account, and I said, if this one turns into a thumping, which it did, what is the conversation about Minnesota? Through week 3, has another team looked better in the entire NFL? Seriously, sit and think with me. Has another team looked better in the entire NFL? Like, Darnold's made mistakes, too. He has a couple of picks already. Jefferson had a couple of drops today in a game where they already overwhelmingly won. And you just have to sit and is there anything they haven't done well all season? Look, they do the little things really well, and they're incredibly sound defensively. Shout out to that guy I spoke to in a Books A Million in Beckley, West Virginia a few weeks ago before the season started, talking about the Vikings. He was a Vikings fan, and he was like, I'm telling you, our additions up front on defense are better than anybody realizes, and they've looked like it through 2 weeks, or 3 weeks now, 3-0 on the season. No one's talking about the Vikings defense. It looks good. We talked about it a little bit last week, and, Stroud threw a really bad pick today, and then one that wasn't really his fault today. But if they're able to, I don't know if this is more of a Houston thing or more of a Minnesota thing. Houston couldn't keep the pressure off Stroud all day. And in particular, Grenard looked incredible for Minnesota. And so I'm like, okay, I don't know if that's pro-Minnesota or anti-Houston or both. Their O-line looks very questionable through 3 weeks of the season, which I didn't think it would for Houston. And with that in mind, that kind of puts a ceiling on them. The Bears are right there on that Sunday night game the entire time. The Colts are right there in week 1. And now you did finally drop one. You got the 2 in the win column, which is massive. A lot of teams don't have that right now. And I believe in Houston. I think Houston is fine. But I'm beginning to wonder as the season goes on if there's a bit of a cap on how good of a season they can have with that offensive line not providing the greatest protection to CJ Stroud. The thing about Minnesota that you wouldn't have expected going into the season with a Sam Darnold offense is that they are constantly tricking defenses into getting the looks they want. They even attacked, there's this whole conversation this week, ban the too high safety look. They're attacking too high safeties better than any team in the league through 3 weeks. They look incredible. They're doing the thing that I've praised New Orleans for and having a ton of pre-snap motion, a ton of, well, not a ton of play action, really just a ton of pre-snap motion. And making defenses pay for it because they're getting an understanding of what's going on, and they're getting weird looks after tricking the defenses by getting who they want into the positions they want. Who they want, of course, being Justin Jefferson more than anything. He was open left and right today in zone looks where it's like, yeah, there's holes, but my God, they were attacking them relentlessly today. I had a conversation with Treads, and I couldn't agree more. I said he took the words out of my mouth on this one. And I'm like, they look like a legit 3-0. And it's not like a normal 3-0. And I'm going to go out on the record and say, through 3 weeks, this Minnesota Vikings team looks better to me, in my mind, and me looking at the eye test and everything, than the 2022 Minnesota Vikings ever did. I was a big non-believer in them. Notably did not believe in them and thought they're not as good as people think. They're not as good as people say. I don't trust them come playoff time. They did win a playoff game, right? This team, and I don't want to get ahead of myself and start talking playoffs, but right now when you're talking about a team that's like, we're almost in October and not a team in the NFL has looked better, you kind of have to wonder, where does it end with them? Minnesota, big ups. Houston, not super concerned, but the offensive line is looking a little concerning for me. Now, moving on now to something I want to try this week. I just think there's so many points to get to this week. I can't get to them all without making this show infinitely long, infinitely more impossible to edit and get up by 7 a.m. Monday morning. So, I'm going to do 5 and 5. 5 takes, 5 minutes, ideally a minute each. Let's go ahead and get started with my first take. This is 5 and 5. First, I think the Dolphins must consider trading for a quarterback ASAP if they aren't punting on the season. And I put in my notes before this, they're not punting on the season, right? And I wonder that because there doesn't seem to be a lot of optimism coming out of that building, and I get it. The way they're handling the Tua concussion situation is a bit strange to me because it just seems like, and God forgive me if this is awful, they're like, all Tua, man. Just worries for Tua, man. And it seems like this week, if we ask the quarterback question, again, this is why my concerns are real, is I feel like they're going to be like, all concerns for Tua, man. Big ups to Tua, man. And I feel that way, too. You heard me say it when I came on the show after that game. But, at some point, you're a team that's expected to be a legitimate threat in the AFC. You have the roster for it. And don't you want Tua to come back in this season and have a salvageable outlook on it? You need to trade for a quarterback if that's going to happen because I don't think Skylar Thompson can get it done. Maybe start Snoop Huntley. Who's to say? My second take is relating to that game. The Seahawks are the hardest team in the NFL to predict at the moment. Harder to predict than Pittsburgh. Well, I'm like, I don't know what to think of them. I have no clue what to think of them. That's a weird 3-0 that they are right now. It's Seattle. Why? Look at this game today. That defense looks unbelievable, and it's a defensive-oriented coach. But, they made mistakes. I think Geno had 2 picks. They looked very average at points. Nobody had a huge game offensively except maybe Zach Charbonnet, who's filling in for the injured Kenneth Walker. But it's like, if you had a game next week and you're making the lines for Vegas, and it's Seattle versus anybody. Seattle versus the Rams, right? 3-0 versus 1-2. What's that look like? The NFC West is wide open, thanks to the 49ers blowing it against the Rams today. And right now the Seahawks are driving that bus. And if they keep this up, they're going to be right in this thing until the very end and potentially make the playoffs. Again, big ups to Seattle. My third take. This one involves Cleveland. You had to see this one coming after this game today, right? I think the Browns look worse than the box scores are showing and that they need to get it going ASAP. I saw some people, and I get a lot of Cleveland tweets on my timeline living in Cincinnati and such, them being a rival and also right down the road, being like, it's not that bad. Watson doesn't look that bad. They aren't that concerning. It is that concerning. He's had some flashes, which I haven't even really been able to say until this season. That's encouraging. But it's go time. It's do or die time for them, and he looks terrible at most of the time. And if the Giants' defense is doing this to you and keeping you this uncomfortable and making you this ineffective to where you're going into the fourth quarter and if not for that late score, you're out of it, when do we have that conversation about Watson and maybe taking a back seat? They're at Vegas, at Washington the next 2 weeks. Both have shown weak defenses. They need to win both. My fourth take, the 49ers, I don't know that they can win the Super Bowl without keeping everyone healthy. Maybe that's not a fair conversation to have, but it just seems like a unique situation when you look at that offense, and I'll never forget it. Those conversations last year about who are the 5 best players on this team. And it's like, I don't know, there's all pro caliber players that probably don't crack the top 5 players on this team because of how good this roster is. With that in mind, why does it seem like when someone is hurt, they're just like, forget it. We can't get it going. And I get that they were in the driver's seat for a lot of this Rams game. Purdy has never won a game without Deebo Samuel. I thought that record is not going to be mattering come Monday. They're winning this game. No, he still didn't win that game. Shout out to the Rams, saving your season by going 1-2. I just think for the 49ers, I wouldn't think this with how deep they are, but you have to keep everyone healthy deep into the playoffs, or your Super Bowl chances look rough in my mind. If everyone's healthy, you can do it all. If not, we'll see. My fifth and final take for 5-5 is I got 0 answers for what to think of either team in Philadelphia, New Orleans this week. If you thought I was non-descriptive, non-conclusive on Baltimore, Dallas, I have nothing that I'm conclusive about with Philly, New Orleans. It seems like, both of the offenses have been, decent all season. Obviously, New Orleans has looked amazing. They were up 3-0 going into the fourth quarter. Philly's made a ton of mistakes, hasn't been able to get it going. They didn't really do that today. They didn't look incredible, but it wasn't like a mistake-riddled game. This turned into one where it felt like whoever got the ball last would win. The team who got the ball last was the Eagles. I think the Saints technically had it with marginal amounts of time left, but the Eagles won. I guess the only conclusion I'm taking away, the Saints are indeed human. Now you can make a joke and be like, do they need 44 to win games? Obviously not true. They were right in this one. I'm not concerned about either team particularly, but I have no real answers about either at the same time. So that was 5-5. I think we went 16 seconds over 5 minutes from when I started, so not bad. I'm going to take that as a guy who rambles and goes on and on and on and gets sidetracked. That was a good way to keep me locked in. I'm like, I got 1 minute to talk about each of these, and let's get them out there. 5-5. We'll see if we keep doing it next week or not. For now, I'm happy with the way it went. So much to talk about from this Sunday, and we're going to keep talking about it. I haven't even talked Chiefs-Falcons or anything of that nature. We're going to talk about them more as the weeks go on, I should say. Or as the week that we're in right now goes on. Not weeks, the week. As this week goes on, we'll talk more about them. That's all I have for you from this Sunday. Let's talk about the 2 football games from this week that are yet to be played and are going to be played tonight. Bengals, Commanders, Jags, Bills. Let's start with Bengals, Commanders. I think it technically is second. I think it starts after. But that's the one I'm going to focus on first. I have a little bit more to say about this one since I'm obviously a little bit more knowledgeable about Cincinnati than I am any other team in the league. Now, here's something that I find interesting, and I'm feeling bumps in my chest talking about this right now because I am worried. I'm incredibly worried. As the game builds up and the pressure is mounting and we are getting to Monday, I am worried. Should I be? Who's to say? But here's the stat. There's 3 teams in the league that don't have a win right now. 2 of them play on Monday night. The other one is the Titans. The Jags, who played the Bills, and the Bengals are 2 of the only 3 teams in the league without a win. It's technically not a fair stat since they are 2 of the only 4 teams that haven't played their Week 3 game yet. But concerning, because it feels like it puts both teams into a must-win situation. 0-2 is not a death sentence, 0-3 basically is. So, here are some thoughts that I have on Bengals Commanders, where it feels like, the Bengals are going to roll them. And talking to my dad, who's a Washington fan, and he's like, Joe's going to have a field day on our defense. And it's like, I don't think you understand. The Bengals tend to play down to their opponents. Go back to 2021, which was Joe's breakout season with Cincinnati, Jamar's rookie season. They win the AFC Championship. And you look, and it's like, they only had 5 breakaway wins in that entire span. And we're talking now 3 and a percentage of a season in going into a 4th season. Over 3 seasons, less than 4 seasons. They only have 5 breakaway wins. They tend to play down. They're favored in a lot of these games. They're expected to win a lot of these games. I know Joe's been hurt for some of that time last year. But it's like, no. They tend to play down. You move that up a year to 2022, they only have like 3 breakaway wins. And that was Carolina and Atlanta in 22 were a couple of them. And so they don't tend to break away and win a lot of their games. Not as much as a team that's been competitive to the level that they have does. And so that's why I'm like, I see this. They are still, right now, as of the time of recording, the biggest pregame favorite of Week 3. Week 1, they were the biggest favorite, lost. Week 2, Baltimore was the biggest favorite, lost. Already in Week 3, haven't even talked about it yet. Tampa was the biggest favorite on Sunday, 1 point under what the Bengals are favored on Monday, 7.5, 6.5. They lost. Big favorites are losing outright right now. If you think the fact that Vegas is giving the Commanders no chance makes me feel better, it doesn't. I've seen this Bengals team play down to their opponent a lot. They have to attack that defense, and they need to do it early. What they did against the Chiefs is their key to success in anything. Tom Brady was talking about it during Ravens-Cowboys. He's like, it's almost cliche to be like, you need to start fast. Everybody knows you need to start fast. It's easier said than done, and everybody wants to do it, so why doesn't every team do it? That said, that is incredibly true for the Bengals. When they score first and are the first on the board with a touchdown, that is, when they score a touchdown first to go up 7-0, they are one of the most dangerous teams in the league this decade, okay? They don't lose those games very often. That said, you start to struggle, Washington gets the ball first, they go down on their scripted drive, they score, you get a weird turnover, they kick a field goal, it's 10-0. That is when the Bengals lose games, okay? They can't allow that to happen against Washington. And if you're Washington, no one's giving you a chance. Everybody's predicting the Bengals to win. I think it was literally a clean slate on those NFL prediction graphics. I imagine all of, if not all but one, of the Monday night people will pick the Bengals to win. Doesn't make me feel any better. With that said, if you're Washington, you have a recipe of how to attack Cincinnati. It's your run game has to get going. Eckler, Brian Robinson have to combine to have a huge night. Week 1, Ramondre Stevenson had a huge game on his own. Week 2, Pacheco, Steele had a very nice game, even though none of them scored touchdowns. Had a very great game on their own, other than the fumble from Steele. The Bengals can't stop the run. They couldn't stop it last season. They've not been able to stop it this season. That's your recipe, Washington. If you want to win this game, feed Eckler and Robinson. Give them the ball 40 times for all I care. That's the recipe. I was talking to a Chiefs fan on Twitter about it, and he was like, man, your defensive coordinator has us, has our number, it seems like, because, the Bengals should have won that game Week 2 against the Chiefs. And I was just like, he stopped running the ball. If you'd have kept running the ball, there was nothing they could have done. They couldn't stop it all game. That's your key, Washington. I'm not making a score prediction on this one, or a winner prediction, because there's 2 games, and my predictions have been terrible so far. We'll get back to it on Thursday night. But don't think it's lost on me that my Survivor pick and Underdog lock, I'm going to have to change the name of that, lost again this week. Let's talk Bills-Jags. This one. The story in this one has to be the Jags. I think the story right now, early in the season, has been the Bills. They've looked like a real power in the AFC, and I'm happy to see it. They've been fun to watch. Allen is my MVP pick. But the story in this one has to be the Jags. I don't have specifics on this because I'm not a Jaguars expert. I don't want to say things that I'm not qualified to say or educated enough to say. But if I were to put a bow on what do I need to see from the Jags in Week 3 Monday Night Football, it's that this offensive scheme needs to show signs of life. Other than a couple of weird plays in a game in Week 1 that you lost to Miami. You didn't win that one, you lost it. They've looked dead. They've looked dead for the better part of a full year at this point. You're like, what? No, real talk. I can't get this out of my head. Treads came on after Week 1 and said, in Treads takes, they've not won a game since last November. It's true. Now, it's even more true. Every single team in the NFL has won a game going back to last December, even the winless teams now, except the Jaguars, who haven't won since they beat the Panthers in the middle of last November. The Jaguars have to win this game somehow. It's an under-the-radar story, in my opinion, that if they lose this one, there's going to be big questions. Trevor Lawrence isn't going anywhere. He just got paid. So, okay, is it Doug Peterson? Are we going to pull the plug on him? I don't know. They seem to get along really well, but at the same time, if it's not working, it's not working. And right now, the scheme is not working, okay? Trayvon Walker has to continue to develop. If he cannot put pressure on Josh Allen, and this defense just lets him get a ton of time back in the pocket, like I want to say like Darnold had a ton of time all day, he picked Houston apart, and that defense in Houston is a legitimate threat. Give Josh Allen time, I don't care if he's throwing to me. They're going to shred you all game. And I don't have a lot of hope for the Jaguars in this game. I talk about favorites and point odds and stuff. Like, the Bills are right there for the biggest favorite of this week. They're just a little under what Washington is an underdog for in their Cincy game, and then what Tampa was favored for in the Denver game. Buffalo is expected to go out there and handily take care of business at home. I see them doing it. I think they will too. But if you're Jacksonville, this is a must-win game. You have to go do the thing, and you got to do it now because you're running out of time. Got some breaks in the AFC South. I said the AFC South's not going to wait for you. Oh, this week it did because Houston lost. You win this game, all of a sudden, you're tied with the Colts. You're over the Titans. One game behind the Texans. Who's to say what happens at that point? You need to do it now. You cannot go to 0-3, not win the Texans, who are the major frontrunner to win that division, lost this week. Go do the thing, Jacksonville. I'm taking Buffalo all the way. So that wraps up everything I have to say for this episode of The Alt. Thank you for joining me. I greatly appreciate you. Excited to be back in tomorrow to talk, hopefully, about the 1-2 Bengals and probably about the 3-0 Bills. We'll talk a little bit more about what I saw from week 3 that I liked, what I didn't like, and some more interesting stories around the league. Beyond that, hit subscribe if you haven't already. I love you. I appreciate you. I will see you tomorrow.